Hey guys, Ronnie here. Bit of an update video on what we're going to be doing today. It's been a little bit since we've seen the Civic in any of our videos here, just because I've been trying to get stuff done on the motor. Haven't filmed too many updates on that just because as far as the physical car itself, only small things have happened so far, which I'll dig into here in a minute. Otherwise, it's mostly been motor stuff, coming up with final parts list and getting them here. That way we didn't get all the way to where it was in and be missing some small parts. So made sure we had all that. I think the only thing we're missing now is just a piece that I want. It has nothing to do with anything going in or running or anything like that. Still have a couple things to do as far as the cooling system. I do still have to flush out the cooling system, the heater core, because I still want to run the heater cores simply for defrost. That's about the only thing I want to run it for. I don't really use it any other time. Obviously, we're not going to be running AC, but I do want to flush out the radiator, the heater core. We've got new hoses for everything, so that part's not even a concern. Basically just because back when it was originally overheating, me thinking that I was going to put a motor not 3 years later into the car, I did what you don't do and threw head gasket sealer in it and just threw the whole bottle and said, screw it, that'll hold it over until I put a motor in, which it technically did. Anytime I drove it after that, it held on long enough to get where I was going. As soon as you got to where you were going, though, it just spiked temperature as soon as you stopped moving, because no air was hitting it, no airflow, nothing, just relying solely off the water pump. And at that point, I think the head gasket sealer did more harm than good. Like, we took off the overflow bottle when we were pulling the motor for this one, and just half of it was just solid mush from head gasket sealer, which I never recommend using head gasket sealer. It is a product that I'm sure has some type of applicable use. I have been taught and seen, and shoot, I've even told people with it in there, back when I was a mechanic for a profession, that, hey, you ran head gasket sealer, I'm not simply going to replace this one part of your cooling system or something because you're still overheating. No, we've got to replace most of it, and if that's the case and you put head gasket sealer in it, odds are you've got a head problem. So that's pretty much what we have to do today. I have to swap the oil pan over to have my oil drain line that we had in the welded bung on the other oil pan for the old motor. That way I don't have to weld a new one into this pan. I already got it, plus I got to do the gasket anyway. I will pick you guys up here in a second and kind of show you what we've done so far. Some of it just definitely housekeeping items, like the engine bay, for example. I wanted it to look better when the motor was in there and not like it had been run through the Sahara Desert. Quick little rebuilds on things, just to make them look nicer, and then other things are actual functional upgrades that we have, just because that's how it's going to work for the motor, and it would just work to make it way more reliable and better for the application. But here, I'll pick you guys up, show you the motor on the stand. Yes, I did paint the block. No, not to look all fancy, but it would make leaks easier to detect. Didn't paint the head, not really worried about that. I did get a little bit of spray on the right hand side, but it's not a show car. It's meant to drive, it's meant to go. I just wanted a bright color to where if a leak does happen on the lower section, on the front or the back, I can easily see it, instead of the grime that was on the motor. Even though it's only a roughly 65 to 70,000 mile motor, didn't have much grime on it, but I did clean it off as best as I could and then sprayed it. That way it just looked refreshed, and to where, like I said, if a leak happens in an important area, we'll see it. It'll be a lot easier to detect this way. This right here was the old AC bracket. That was a big thing that I still wanted to run, not because I wanted to run AC, but because Honda's torque mounts for the driver's side, it bolts here, comes off, and then bolts up into your frame. The AC bracket is also that mount. So obviously I'm not running AC, and excuse the mess here, but obviously with the turbo, it didn't fit. It wouldn't fit. The old AC bracket, this is just part of what we cut out of it. Super thick, super big. It's supposed to hold the compressor, but we don't need it for that purpose anymore. So I'm hoping that actually works, and if it does, then cool, because I've never seen an aftermarket bracket online for the driver's side, unless I just haven't looked hard enough, because it wasn't that big a deal, because I knew we could do this. I haven't seen a turbo application torque mount using the old AC bracket. Let me know if you have, because maybe, you know, down the line, if this doesn't work, maybe I'll get it. But for right now, I mean, that's super thick. That's actually forged cast aluminum, or, you know, it's super, I don't know how to word it, guys. It's strong. It's fine. It should be okay for when I actually order the torque brackets. And that's the one part I was talking about, the actual torque mounts. We're running the Hasport mounts for motor mounts. Those are actually a set I bought for Dad's silver hatch that was before his YouTube era. They're the Hasport Street Series mounts, so they were pretty solid. I thought he was going to like them, and he did, but just for when he was driving his silver Civic that he doesn't own anymore, they were just too stiff. They made the car really shaky, which for his application, he wasn't building a full-on race car. It was more like a daily driver street car. Which is what this is, but we're more in depth than that now. It is a street car, not necessarily a daily driver. It could be if you really wanted it to. I mean, I daily drove it turboed for, I'd like to say, a year and a half, 2 years before I got other cars and everything like that. But it's not. I mean, its primary use is going to be to go to events. Not shows. I mean, it'll go to shows, but it's not there for the purpose of winning any awards as a show car. It's just a very clean example of an SI EG hatch. N92, the first year of that generation, which any other Honda guy is just like, yeah, so it's an EG. But there's just small things in 92 that were details that weren't in the future years. I'm not going to go through explaining all of them. I mean, the main one was that the dash didn't even have a provision for a passenger airbag because it didn't need it back in 92. But just small details, and the car means that much. Pretty paint job. Obviously imperfections in the paint job, and it's super dirty right now just from being here the past 3 years under a cover for when I could finally do it. But it'll go to events like H days, maybe, if I can even find time. I would love to take the fiance and the kid to an H day. Take her Integra. I'd take this because he's not going to be riding in the back, the kid. So, and we will do a full overview of the car once it's clean and the motor in and running and everything like that. I'll be able to show you guys the cage, the software that it's running, and just small details like that no one on the channel has really ever been able to see of the car. But back to what we've done. Anyway, yes, so motor, block painted. We already did the water pump, timing belt. Even though it was, you know, a motor from a depot and everything, I still start out by always doing a water pump and timing belt. That way you can get in there and see, was it off time? Was there an issue? Is there a leak at the water pump inside of there? Odds are not. But we always go in there to make sure. Plus, I just want to start fresh as far as the timing system. So new tensioner, new spring, new water pump, timing belt, cleaned up inside of there, but there wasn't much to clean up, honestly. It was very clean inside of there. We put the new spark plugs in I got, which they're the same ones I was running before. They're NGKs, but I don't remember the exact part number right now. I know they're also the ones that NGK recommends stock for a 2JZ, just because they're actually 1 or 2 steps colder, which, if you don't know what that means, that there's plenty of explanations online as to what colder spark plugs do, especially in turbo applications. But yeah, they're 2 steps colder than the factory ones would have been in an Integra or a CRV, and like I said, NGKs. I did get the intake manifold bolted on last night with my fuel rail, my injectors, and everything. Last night I started super late. It was a day off after a very long work week, so I didn't get started until late. Dad and I did off camera clean off the surface for where that intake manifold gasket goes, just because the old gasket, I could wholeheartedly believe it was factory. The factory gasket that came on it, because it was super hard to get off. We ended up having to extract every stud out of it just to be able to clean it as a flat surface and get it done. This is the same intake manifold I was running before, actually off of that motor, not even just the same one, different car, same exact intake manifold. I had the option to use another one that came with a different head I got, but this one worked. It already had my injectors installed. It already had my fuel rail on it, my pressure regulator, my gauge, and I had already been running it. So the way it was hooked up before is the way it can be hooked up after. I have a couple, I believe, coolant passages to figure out once we get to that point. I know this one goes here. I know another one from there goes there. The only trouble I'm having is finding out where this one in the bottom of the head goes. I'm pretty sure it goes to that port right there. I just can't remember right now. I'll have to look up the diagrams and actually figure it out. Now, yes, it is a B20 motor. Still have some cleanup to do from when we were cleaning off that gasket. But any Honda person knows, if you go to put a B20 in a Civic or an Integra, you do have to swap the intake manifold over anyway, because it comes with a super tall one for when they're in the CRVs. Like, no joke, the intake manifold is usually up here on them. Actually, it's over there in that very messy corner. That tall guy right there. And it doesn't fit. So either way, I had to swap it over from the one that came on it when I picked it up. I'm going to be running that alternator. I did spray the back of the motor mainly because of this oil pressure adapter right here to run my turbo feed line, which is ran right now. I do have to run that a little bit cleaner, but all that's tight. Got a little bit of overspray on it, cleaned it. That filter is not the one I'll be running, but I will be keeping that filter just because it's all in Japanese and it's kind of cool, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, our oil feed line, I got to replace the heat wrap on there just because it does come close to the exhaust, but I have two brackets on there to where the oil feed line literally gets bolted along the valve cover to go down to the turbo, so that way it doesn't just flop around in there. In the engine bay, we did do a couple things. I cleaned up the engine bay as best as I could to be able to just brand new. It's someone had repainted it before, so it wasn't the best paint job, so it doesn't need to be the best one. It was just really dirty, so I sprayed it off, cleaned it. I still have to swap the fuel filter lines over to that filter. That filter, I believe, was from VMS, I believe, but it's actually a removable unit that you can wash out with definitely a higher filtration rate. I'm still on the fence whether I'm going to swap to a stock one just to begin with, to kind of run through the leftover fuel that was in this when it was parked, which I did check last night because I ran up and picked up fresh gas because I'm in hopes that we're going to be starting this thing today. But there was only, there's like less of an eighth of a tank of the old gas in there, and I dumped 4 gallons of fresh gas, so hopefully that'll mix up and be fine. But I might run the extra stock filter I have now just to run through a tank or two of gas, and then at 1,000 miles, when I actually pull the valve cover back off, do valve adjustment again, make sure everything's set in correctly, might swap over to the VMS one, or I might just leave it in there for good and just wash it out when comes time. Oh, also, with the valve cover gasket and everything, I have a really nice Skunk 2 cam seal. My buddy Dan was the one actually doing the water pump and timing belt while I was working on suspension stuff, which I'll get to in a second. And we completely forgot about the cam seal, so I said, hey, I'm going to have the valve cover off again in like 1,000 miles anyway. So I'll just swap it over then. It shouldn't leak. There was no signs of leaking from it before. But yeah, so we've got the Hasport mount in. I did have to get longer bolts because we didn't save the bolts that came with them when Dad removed them from his Civic over a year ago. But we did re-weld a motor mount from the Rabbit Transit accident years ago. I never remembered to weld this little corner back on, so we did clean that up, weld it in. And we did redo all the suspension up front. I still have to do like the rearward bushings and everything, but that'll come on a lift. But we did get brand new upper control arms in. I pressed in new poly bushings into the uppers for the bracket piece that actually bolts in up here. That bolts in from underneath, and there were old bushings in there, so poly bushings in there. Lower control arms replaced, all full poly bushings there, especially on the inside. One of the big issues we had, I can't remember if it's on a video or not, this guy right here, I think when the car was hit, because it was hit on this side, pretty sure when it was hit, the welded nut that is inside of that subframe broke loose, but since the bolt was tight, it didn't really matter. It didn't fall out. I just think the weld broke, and then when we finally pulled out this bolt to do the lowers and everything, I heard it just fall on the subframe, and then it had nothing to go to. So that was a little hiccup for a little bit till I could get my buddy down here with his fancy welder, as I call it. We have one, but we don't have gas for it. Ours is one of the Miller's. Yeah, Miller electric welder, so it is nice. It's just we don't have gas for it, and I'm not as good as a welder as he is. So we actually ended up cutting a window into the subframe. I had to order nuts online because apparently the thread pitch for these, which I believe was 12 by 1.25, nobody wants to carry in either a flange nut or a nylock. I think you can find nylock, but considering we were closing the subframe back up, I didn't want to just trust nylock, especially because if I ever remove the bolt again, which I'm sure I will, I didn't want that that nut to just fall into the subframe. So I waited for him to get down here, ordered a flange nut, and we fully welded a new nut back into the subframe. That way it is just like how it was before, if not better, because it's got a lot thicker weld on it than it ever has. And now we can tighten that down. And then all we did was we took the piece of metal that we cut out, which was maybe only an inch by inch section, maybe a little more to get the tip of the welder in there. We put it back in and laid a bunch of supporting weld and then beat it over it and then painted over it. So it's sealed back up. I see a lot of people when that happens, because apparently it does happen to more than just me, apparently. At that point they just say, nope, I'm replacing the subframe because I don't want to cut it open. You can absolutely cut it open. It's a 32 year old, I don't know, 1992, yeah, it's a 32-year-old car almost. And it's thick metal. As long as you weld back in and make it stronger than what it was before, you're fine. We had no issues on this side. My harness is still in the way because I'm looming up the visible parts, or the parts that I can loom, which again, thanks to Tom for the wire loom. It definitely wasn't a necessary thing, but it just kind of helps in making everything a little bit cleaner. You see a ratchet here because I'm still got one more bolt to swap over, that back bolt for the T-bracket mount. But as far as under the hood, that's about it. It was just a lot of cleaning it up. The suspension was important. And with the engine out, it just made it a lot easier to do. So everything's there. Everything that could be checked has been checked. Yeah, we'll get it done. Oh, we also redid the hood pins again with Dan and I. It's not the cleanest install, but it's way cleaner than it was before. The red ones that were in here before, they are flush mount pins. I had red ones. This one over here exploded at one point, so I was only running the one, and that was probably for a year, but the one held it. Now there's new ones in there, but all I did was change the mounts, and the pins no longer lined up, so thankfully they came with new pins because I had to cut out the old ones that I had welded in there, and put new ones in, which they're way better adjustable now. If I ever need to adjust them, we can just chink this weld right here, just one tiny weld, and actually adjust the pins. Again, like I said, it's not a show car, and a lot of you guys watching it would be like, why the hell did you do that, or why are you even wasting time doing that, or why don't you make it look prettier? It doesn't need to be 100% pretty. It's not a show car. I can already tell you it's one of the cleaner examples up in this area anyway of just a hatch in general. Typically you see these things all cut up, boogered up, quarter panels falling out of it. It's painted about 5,000 different colors like it's a Harlequin car, or they're just trashed. So I mean, it's already one of the cleaner examples. Yes, things could be done to make it look prettier. Right now we just want to get it running now. What I wanted to do before the motor got put in has been done. And that's about all there is to it. Transmission, we're reusing the same old transmission because that transmission was the smoothest one I've ever had in my life. It is a B18 transmission, not a GSR 16 with the shorter gears. It's an 18, just 5-speed, no LSD. I wish it had LSD, but oh well, I don't want to pay for LSD. But there it is. It works. Reusing that one, the bolts should be fine there. Leftover parts table, we've got my cam seal. I've got Mishimator rad hoses going on it. Don't look at that. Gasket sealer, just as an added security as far as like the oil pan, just thin line. Actually, I will show this. Permatex Ultra Black, probably the best sealant I ever used when I was professionally in the technician field. It seals super quick, so you got to get everything together quickly, whatever you're using it on, but it's a very strong seal. Definitely oil resistant. We do have our clutch here. This was the same clutch Dad ran in the Silver Civic, which it is a Stage 3 6-puck. It's on the cheaper side of them. I didn't spring for an Exetti or ACT or anything like that. But I drove his car with this clutch around. It felt phenomenal. So shouldn't have any issues there. And then there's not much else over here other than gaskets, belt, etc. But yeah, guys, there's not much more I can update you on. Sorry if I was kind of rambling along in this video. Didn't mean for it to sound like a ramble. It's just there's a lot of things I haven't updated on just because I was trying to get preliminary stuff done. Some of you may find it interesting, some of you may not. I certainly do, because it's been 3 years since I've been able to touch this car. Back when I was driving this car, and back when, you know, I was just into the cars all the time. You know, you'd go to work, you'd leave, you'd go over to a buddy's house, work on cars all night, sleep for maybe an hour, wake up, go to work, work on cars all day, do the same thing back and forth and back and forth, and that's all I did for a while. And this car was like I loved it. I still do. I want to love it again. I want to drive it. It's been sitting under a cover for too long. So yes, there's other things I could do, but I'm not going to, because the car was, to me, perfect as it was before. But obviously just with a not good motor at that point because of dumb decisions. So now, fast forward 3 years later, the car is one thing that hasn't changed. About everything else in my life has. Job, I'm engaged, got an awesome little kid, you know, and just proving that even if your life twists turns around and you end up doing something completely different than what you thought you were going to do, and no matter what you end up getting, like I said, a house, kids, you know, getting married, feel like you don't have time for projects. That's one of the reasons why I am on Dad's channel, is just he wants to also educate people with his channel. And he wants to do something with his time that he actually enjoys, especially now being fully retired from the military. I'm also here because, one, I enjoy it. Two, I want to help him out, and it just, the videos will outlive us as long as YouTube's still a thing. But I also want to show that, like, I'm not an older guy. I'm mid-20s, but life definitely caught up. A lot of things now, a lot of responsibilities, but I still have time to do cool stuff like this. Still build the car that I had before any of that happened, rebuild it, be able to drive it, do it with my friends, do it with my dad. I believe Tyler is actually going to be over here soon today to help to kind of fast forward all this. Like I said, I still have to swap the clutch over, need to get the flower bolts, mid shaft, mid axle shaft, intermediate shaft, whatever you guys want to call it. But it should get done. It should at least get in the engine bay and at least started. Now, that's when I'm going to be very OCD and looking over everything to make sure we're good. And sorry for the tank top. I don't think I'm cool, but it's going to be really, really humid today, so I'm wearing it. And I don't want to ruin any of my good shirts. I have too many shirts as it is, and I really don't want to hear it if I go back in that house and she sees another shirt all greased up and messed up, and then she has to wash. But anyway, we'll try to film continual updates for you today. Sorry it was a rambly video, but I also know we needed to get another full-length video up here soon as well. But now to just kind of lead you in, we'll definitely post some shorts today of it. And hopefully a video on startup and getting everything done. Talk to you later.